A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the three key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan.
Well, folks, he did it. Donald Trump actually did it. He took the steps that many of his predecessors deemed was a bright red line and a bridge too far to cross. Donald Trump announced via Truth Social last night, that we have completed our, first off, who is we? Because I was at home, completed our very successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. I'm sure you guys have all seen this. This has been breaking news nonstop since last night, and everybody is closely monitoring the situation. However, I did post that video of the B-2 bombers taking off from Missouri, headed over that way, and literally while I was finishing editing and posting that video, this dropped. That the military has chosen to get directly involved in a hot war with Iran. I just want to back it up a little bit and talk about just the MAGA fallout that has been happening from all of this. This has definitely split the MAGA base. Charlie Kirk posted this public poll, who is a huge Trump cheerleader. Charlie Kirk is like a staunch MAGA Trumper. Posted this to his MAGA base. Should the U.S. get involved in Israel's war against Iran? Only 10.3% said yes, 89.7% said no, and almost 500,000 votes were cast. As the final results, you can see here, 489,266 votes were cast. So you would think that, you know, his audience and his followers that engaged in this, saying that we do not want this war, he would kind of listen to his base, but I'm sure he probably got a call from the White House or whoever, his handler, and told him to fall in line. Because after that, we see just this slew of messages or a post on Twitter saying Iran gave President Trump no choice. For a decade, he had been adamant that Iran will never get a nuclear weapon. And here's the thing. We don't even have the actual intelligence that Iran has developed a nuclear weapon. They keep saying that they were enriching they were up to 60% enrichment. And then, you know, mainstream media and everybody is saying that to go from 60 to 90%, which is what you need for a nuclear bomb, is pretty much you're already there. So if you're at 60%, you're already 99% there. So the math isn't mathing, because the jump from 60% to 90% is kind of drastic. That's a 30% difference. He goes on to say, with the weight of the world on his shoulders, President Trump acted for the betterment of humanity. For the next few hours, spare us the armchair quarterbacking, instead trust in our commander-in-chief. The commander-in-chief didn't even listen to his director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who, might I add, we haven't heard anything from. People are now saying that she was actually in the room, but when the photos came out of the Situation Room of Trump sitting there wearing his red hat and J.D. Vance over there with his eyeliner, nobody saw Tulsi Gabbard in that room, and Tulsi Gabbard hasn't said anything. And this is the director of national intelligence. There has been no statement from her, nothing. It's been absolute crickets, and she was not in any of the photos that we saw. So if she was actually in the room, there's no evidence that have been released of her actually being in the room when this strike was carried out. 16 hours ago, he said that Trump would be addressing the nation. You guys have probably seen that video of him, you know, pretty much didn't take no questions, no nothing, just pretty much address the American people on what happened. And then he says, America stands with President Trump. But Charlie, almost 90% of your audience that took part in your poll said that they do not want this war. Americans do not want this war. Thomas Massie, who is not necessarily MAGA, I mean, he's been a heavy critic of Trump. In 2020, he didn't want to support the COVID relief aid package, and Trump attacked him for that. Yeah, so Thomas Massie has pushed back a lot, but he did say this is not constitutional, you know, quote tweeting Donald Trump's post on X or Twitter, saying that this is not constitutional. And a lot of the argument has been that Congress had given the authorization for the president to authorize strikes based off of 9/11 for anyone that has taken part in that. However, this is Iran. This didn't have anything to do with 9/11. I mean, that was almost 25 years ago. That was almost a quarter decade ago. Mike Johnson has been online on Twitter saying the president made the right call and did what he needed to do. Leaders in Congress were aware of the urgency of the situation, and the commander-in-chief evaluated that the imminent danger outweighed the time it would take Congress to act. Thomas Massie replies to this saying, why didn't you call us back from vacation to vote on military action if there was a serious threat to our country? Which is a complete valid point. If there was an imminent threat, people would be notified. Come to find out, members of the Democratic leadership were not notified about this. Apparently, the White House reached out to Republican lawmakers and Republican leaders in Congress, but apparently they did not reach out to Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader in the House of Representatives, or Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the United States Senate. He goes on to say, I introduced a war powers resolution on Tuesday while Congress was on vacation. We should have had plenty of time to debate and vote on this. So what he's saying is, if there was such an imminent threat to our country that there could have been a mushroom cloud or one of our allies could have been obliterated, you should have immediately called Congress back. He goes on to say, when two countries are bombing each other daily in a hot war and a third country joins the bombing, that is an act of war. I'm amazed at the mental gymnastics being undertaken by neocons in DC and their social media bots to say we aren't at war so they can make war. And this goes to show, Laura Loomer was saying, this is just a tactical military strike on their nuclear facilities. What's the big deal? Imagine if that happened here in the United States. Geez, I did not think that I would see this from Candace Owens. She says a full payload of bombs was dropped, quoting Donald Trump, followed by, quote, now is the time for peace, utterly deranged. If we had raised the 100 million Adelson gave him on GoFundMe, maybe he would have kept his promise. Guess we'll never know. This is rich coming from Candace Owens, who threw the entire black community to the ground so that she could cash in and secure a bag with this. And now the chickens are coming home to roost. It is wild to see this complete 180 from her. Because even at her wedding, there was a photo of her wearing a Trump MAGA hat at her wedding, in her wedding dress and all of that. And I believe it was at one of Trump's private resorts or whatever, at one of his hotels. I believe that's where her wedding was. Anyway, just to see this split and coming out publicly against him is extremely fascinating. You want to know who else we haven't heard from? We haven't heard from Tucker Carlson. I haven't seen anything from Tucker Carlson about this, who has been anti-war and has said many times he does not want the U.S. to get directly involved in another endless war. And he actually was a huge supporter of the invasion of Iraq, but quickly in hindsight, apologized for that and realized, hey, this was actually wrong. We spent $3 trillion. We were over there for 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, and nobody understood the assignment. Laura Loomer posting this of Tucker Carlson with Greta Thunberg on a boat saying, quote, how dare you, President Trump. This is absolutely wild. And just to mention, let me go back to these. These are getting huge reactions. 75,000 likes from Candace Owens. Thomas Massey, 42,000 likes, 46,000 likes. Just not 149,000 likes. Most of his following is probably conservative Republicans or Republicans in general. Marjorie Taylor Greene, even 197,000 likes on X, coming out publicly against Donald Trump. Every time America is on the verge of greatness, we get involved in another foreign war. There should not be bombs falling on people of Israel if Netanyahu hadn't. There would not be bombs falling on the people of Israel if Netanyahu had not dropped bombs on the people of Iran first. Israel is a nuclear-armed nation. This is not our fight. Peace is the answer. It is astounding to see this coming out from Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was probably Trump's biggest cheerleader constantly. Even she was going into these prop prison cells of January 6th rioters who attacked the Capitol, and doing photo ops and saying that we need to free them and all of this. But now this is a step too far. Meghan McCain also saying here, Trump doesn't really give two shits what Tucker Carlson thinks. Trump just screwed the GOP and now the missiles will fly to Tel Aviv, embroiling the U.S. in another Middle East war over non-existent weapons of mass destructions again is the height of stupidity. Of course, Israel owns Trump and 80% of Congress. Fuck you. What about the American people? We don't want to be involved in this shit. Your dad and Trump were both Israel first, just itching to bomb Iran because Israel wanted to. I'm not a fan of the move because one of my favorite things to say about Trump was, quote, no more wars. So I guess I can't say that anymore. The MAGA influencer sphere is melting down. Can't say that he's the peace. They were the peace ticket. He and JD Vance can't say that they were the peace ticket anymore. Can't say that he was the anti-war president, that he wasn't going to start another war. There are a lot of repercussions that could happen from this. You know, Iran had said very clearly, if the United States gets involved, we will consider that an act of aggression and that they are involving themselves in the war and they are complicit, and we will retaliate. There are a lot of military troops, American military troops in the region that can be soft targets, but there's also things that could happen here on American soil that a lot of people aren't not talking about. Furthermore, let's say if they don't want to take, an act of terror or military aggression, what they could do is just shut down the Strait of Hormuz and make everybody feel it. They did say everybody would feel it. The Strait of Hormuz has 21 million barrels of oil that flow through it. And if they shut that strait down, that would have catastrophic effects on the global supply chain. Furthermore, I think it's important to highlight that they still don't even know exactly what the extent of this damage is if they completely took it out, because these 30,000 pound bunker buster bombs have never been used before. This is the first time that they have been deployed. So they don't know if this actually completely wiped out Iran's entire nuclear weapons program. However, Iranian state media is now saying this.
تنها بخشی که در سایت هسته‌ای فورdo آسیب دیده این تونل‌های ورودی و خروجی بودند و آسیبی به خود تأسیسات.
They are saying that the only parts of the Fordo nuclear facility that were harmed were the entrance and the exits, but the actual facility themselves have not been harmed. But then they had also said that all of the materials and things like that had already been moved prior before this bombing occurred. Fascinating. We're going to end up seeing, because it's going to take the Pentagon a little while to assess the damage and see what happens. But then again, the supreme leader has pretty much called for the naming of his successor. Israel is probably going for complete regime change, and I think it's important to note what Israel does next in this step. If Iran retaliates and continues striking them, they're going to keep going. But I feel like even if Iran doesn't strike back, Israel will continue to keep striking them because they want complete and total regime change. They do not want Ayatollah there anymore. They want somebody else. They want somebody else to run and keep saying that the Iranian people need to be liberated. Netanyahu even said that the other day, saying the Iranian people need to stand up and be liberated from this regime. But then comes to the United States and says that we need to wipe out their nuclear facilities, and that's what this is about. It is clear that the United States is going to get dragged into another war. We're dragged into another war. That's what this is. One thing that I think is important to note about the Iranian people is that they are extremely proud. I think that the U.S. doing this and Israel bombing them and the U.S. getting directly involved has definitely rallied them. They're patriotic to their country, even though if they might not support the current regime that's in power, they don't want to see their neighbors, their homes, their livelihoods destroyed. They don't want to see their communities completely burned by these missiles in another war. And so I think what it means is they are going to go riding out, even if it means complete obliteration. It's one of those things to where it's like, okay, well, I'm not going to go down without a fight. And so for Donald Trump to sit up here and say that this is going to force them back to the negotiating table, it's time for peace. Let me put it in street code. Iran is going to come and get their lick back. That's what they're going to come and do. They said, hey, this is up between us and Israel. Anybody else that gets involved can get it too. That's pretty much what it is. So I don't see this forcing them back to the negotiating table. This is not peace through strength. This is not peace through strength. And also, does our word mean anything? Does the word of the President of the United States mean nothing? Because if you are going to say you're going to give 2 weeks for diplomacy and then literally a couple of days later bomb him, and then lie to the American people saying that you were going to give peace and diplomacy a chance, but then escalate things to a whole new level by getting us directly involved in the hot war with Iran, I don't know, man. Let me know your guys' comments and thoughts below.